Thank you for joining us on this episode of Beyond the Harbor. Today, my very special guest is Craig Menear. Craig retired from Home Depot in 2022 as chairman and CEO. He has had a career in retail, merchandising, supply chain, all of those things. And he is just a great guy. He and his wife, Dawn, are good friends of ours and have done some really great work with our previous church, continue to do great work with the Salvation Army, and have been just true friends to us in times when we needed someone to come alongside. And so appreciate Craig very much, and I appreciate very much you being willing to join me today for this conversation.
Sure, absolutely. Great to be here. Thank you.
So Craig, you were at Home Depot. You joined in 1997.
Correct.
Yes.
And I became CEO in 2014.
And so you did a lot of things there, but during your time, especially during your time at the helm, Home Depot did a lot of amazing things. I mean, that was what that organization did under your leadership is really one of the great American business stories of the 21st century. And I want to get into all of that and get your perspectives on that, of what your leadership, your philosophies on leadership, what makes the difference in organizations like that. But I want to go back to the beginning first. And one of the most interesting things I think about you is the fact that you and Dawn are both from Flint, Michigan. You grew up just, you said, a few houses down from one another.
Yep, we did. Yeah. So yes, we both grew up in Flint. Dawn was actually born in Canada, came to the US as a baby. And when we were both 10 years old, she moved in 5 houses down the street from me. And so we've known each other forever. And so yeah, we grew up in Flint.
Flint is part of the heart of the American industrial production, automotive, working class neighborhood. So to come from that, I mean, would that be an accurate representation of your experience? And to come from that to then to, in the first chair leading one of the world's largest corporations, that's quite a journey.
It is. And no, that would be accurate. I mean, when we grew up in Flint, grew up in the 60s and 70s. It was a booming town in the early days, right? When we grew up, there were 9 General Motors plants in Flint. And then, as you can imagine, all the ancillary supply base that, was around those. My dad was a tool and die maker for AC Spark Plug, which is part of General Motors, for 41 years.
Wow.
He was obviously very, very handy. And so I grew up doing projects with him all the time. And so kind of got my hands into the tools, if you will, early on, working with my dad. So it was a great place to grow up. It really was. It was a vibrant, booming town in the 60s and the first part of the 70s.
So from there, you went on to college at Michigan State.
I did. Yeah.
So you've remained very active in the alumni association there.
Yep. I have been very proud to go to Michigan State. Received a great education there as a business major. Interestingly enough, specializing in human resources, which technically I never spent a day of my life working in, but as you can imagine, being in business, it's all about the people at the end of the day. So that education served me well.
So learning how to work with your hands, how to make things from your own, from your own imagination with your dad, and what a great and valuable skill set to have. What was it about the opportunity of human resources? Was there something in your upbringing they said, this is what I want to do, this is who I think I am, or was it just the opportunity and a time in America where it's full of opportunity? And I love the way you described Flint in particular, but I think a lot of people could think about different hometowns, and that there's just a booming time and lots of opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I knew I wanted to be involved in business from the very beginning. And I honestly don't know that I can tell you to this day why I actually specialized in human resources. Again, never spent, a day in that technically in that field. But it gave you all the basic backgrounds of business. So you had to go through all the statistics, the accounting, the business law, all that good stuff. But then it also gave you a solid background in terms of, people management and as well as the marketing and all of that. And I think over time, as I reflect on it, that ultimately ended up serving me well in the culture of Home Depot.
Mm. And when, those people skills and the focus on the people side, coupled with, the technical background, I guess, that you had growing up, it actually, in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense, especially for an organization like Home Depot.
Yep, it
Al-
does. And
Almost as if you were being prepared for that.
almost, yes.
But now, while you were at Michigan State, you told me that it was a long way from starting at Michigan State to graduation,
Oh yeah.
and your dad played a major role in that.
Yeah, no, I was a decent student in high school. You know, and swam competitively. I spent, 4 hours in the pool a day. But I was a good student, a reasonably good student. I got into college, and candidly, in the first year, where you're going through all the, core curriculum, if you will, um, and I never liked math, so I made the mistake of crunching two math classes into one. They had a course that I could do. I could knock out 2 semesters in one semester. I did that. Ooh, big mistake. I mean, I
Seemed like a good
struggled
idea at the time, but
at the time. Yeah, I struggled in my first year. I really did. I really struggled in part of my second year, and I remember telling my dad at one point, I'm like, I don't know if this college thing is for me. I really don't. I'm struggling, and I'd rather go fly jets in the Air Force if I could make that happen. And my dad looked at me and said, "Well, no, that's not going to happen until they kick you out. So get back there and get to work." And I did, and then obviously made it through the first couple of years. And then I got into my major courses, which I absolutely loved and did well in my last couple of years.
yeah,
So, but I was not your top of the class student at Michigan State by any means.
they have. I'm sure they have a very different opinion of you now. So started then in the business world of Montgomery Wards, and
Yep.
you spent how many years with them?
It's about 4 years with them. I started in Detroit, moved pretty quick. Went from Detroit to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to a new store, took on additional responsibilities there. And then again, this is one of those things where, you're not really sure how all this transpired, but I was there for maybe 7 months, 8 months, and I got a call to come in and interview for the assistant national sales manager job for paint and hardware, and that would have been in the corporate office in Chicago. And so I went in. I actually got that job, and it was an interesting role because you basically developed all the promotional activities and programs for those two departments within the store, and you had to go in and pitch for space. Like for ad space and all of the resources. That was part of what my job was, is to go in and help our national sales manager build that out and actually pitch for the resources to be able to drive our business. And you worked with all the merchants to pull together, your pitch.
Hmm.
And it was fun. I was probably 10 years younger than my peers in the other departments at the time. So I used to play a game with myself, and we would pitch to the senior vice presidents
Uh-huh.
for resources. And before I go into all those meetings, I'd sit and I'd try to write down all the questions that I believe that the senior VP would ask and prepare the answers in advance. And then I grade myself on how many of the questions I got right and how many I missed. So it was good training. It was fun.
Wow. So before that, I mean, you're on the ground in the market, in the stores, and then now you're sort of an inside sales, but it really sounds like and what I've heard referred to as an entrepreneurial type of environment. You're pitching for business, you're
Yep.
running your own kind of line and competing within the organization.
For
So,
resources, right?
no, yeah.
Yep.
And so Home Depot, fast forward a number of years, you've been in retail. Like you said, you were with IKEA for a period
Yep.
of time as well. And everybody knows IKEA. And then Home Depot 1997.
Well, when I left, if I step back a minute, when I left Montgomery Wards, I left Montgomery Wards and moved to Southern California to go into the home center industry with an individual that was running our group at Wards, who became the president of the company. It was a regional home improvement business, and one of the dominant businesses in home improvement in Southern Cal. And so I've always had a passion for that type of retail, the home improvement kind of retail, because I spent a number of years in it. And while I was there, I met an individual who at the time was our regional vice president of store operations. So he ran all the stores for this regional home center called Ole's. And he had gone on as Home Depot had opened and begun to, develop their business model in stores and started gaining traction. They were putting serious pressure in the home center industry, right? And he had left and gone to work for Home Depot. And in 1997, he was opening a new Southwest office in Dallas, Texas. We were decentralized at the time. And so his office, he was becoming the president of the Southwest division of Home Depot. And we were going to cover, that whole Southwest territory and go head to head with our chief competitor at the time, Lowe's, in their first big box retail outlet that looked like a Home Depot. And so he finally convinced me. At that time, I had moved on into actually a business that I was in with a couple of partners that was everything for a 3-year-old and under. We were at a baby store. And we had just finished a prototype, opened that, started to do well. We were going to go to venture capital to try to raise money to expand and roll that out when Toys R Us announced Babies R Us.
Oh,
So
wow.
timing in life is everything, right? And you go, wow, our timing was not good there. So this individual who was becoming the division president in the Southwest for Home Depot called me. This was the second time he tried to recruit me earlier and called me and told me, he goes, Craig, he goes, yes, sell your portion back to your partners and you got to come work for me. And so Barry convinced me to go to work for Home Depot, and we up and moved the family from Southern Cal to Dallas, Texas, and spent 4 years in Dallas. When I joined the company as a merchant, became a divisional merchandise manager running several departments, and then ultimately the vice president of merchandising for the Southwest division. And then in 2001, the company made a decision to centralize all of merchandising. So we had 8 buying offices that became central in Atlanta, and I moved to Atlanta in 2001. And at that time, I became the merchandising vice president for hardware.
Okay.
And that's how I got to Atlanta.
Okay.
And so that was, yeah, 2001, I guess.
Mhm. So what were some of the of those years from that time until you were asked to step into the role as CEO? What are some of the highlights that you look back on and just times that were the most fulfilling, the most fun, or maybe the most challenging? Just some of the highlights of those years.
Sure. So I'd say, some of the most fun was when you're in merchandising and you're running a business. Again, same thing applies. You have to pitch the company for resources. You're selling yourself to your vendor community because they've got to invest in you, right? They have to invest in capital to do what you want to do to drive the business. And if they don't believe in you, they're not going to invest in the capital. And so I was able to, when we came in and centralized it, merchandising, I was able to build a hardware team that I thought was pretty spectacular. I was able to recruit some of the great merchants from around the country to come in and join the team. And we actually got to develop some really cool programs and build some amazing relationships. Anybody that's really familiar with Home Depot is aware of the Ryobi program at Home Depot, which is a tool program in both hardware and garden. Was able to negotiate the exclusive relationship with a company that owned that brand and bring that to Home Depot, which was a ton of fun. And then at the same time, working with my merchant in the area, we developed the Rigid Tool program to as a proprietary private brand program, working with a combination of two suppliers, Emerson, who owned the Rigid brand, and then the company that actually TTI that actually produced the product under that brand. And that was a huge win for us overall in the business. And so those are really, really fun times. Um, Probably some of the most challenging times, though. Um, After doing that, I became senior vice president of hard lines and then ultimately senior vice president over all of merchandising. And when Frank Blake took over in 2007, January of 2007, Frank promoted me to executive vice president of merchandising. And at that time, then I had also responsibility for marketing, global sourcing, supply chain. He ultimately turned over as well, and our online business. And those were there were some challenging times in that from the standpoint that we were centralizing replenishment, which was interesting. Went from 28,000 people in the stores ordering goods to a couple hundred people assisted by computers ordering the goods.
Wow.
As you might imagine, that was a huge change management effort with the stores because they're
Mhm.
giving up control.
Mhm.
So those were interesting times. That was actually a 5-year full change management effort to get that done. And then at the
And you were part of the team that was overseeing that, having
yeah,
to push
yep,
that through.
yep.
I mean, there's
Same.
obviously benefits to that, and not
Sure.
just financial, but just
Right.
logistically. But there's also, as you said, that's a hard change to make.
It was. And at the time, prior to 2007, we were going through some tough times at Home Depot. We were not focused where we needed to be. We were actually, losing transaction, firing customers, if you will, um, struggling to keep the stores in stock. So we had a lot of work to do to rebuild the competitive position of Home Depot and worked with some amazing people on the team. I had an incredible supply chain leader, an incredible marketing person, um, great merchants, and we got the replenishment thing put in place. We had to build a whole new supply chain for the Home Depot, which we did. That took several years, but we got it done. And we were able to dramatically improve the in-stock position for our customers, which is hugely important for our professional customers that shopped at Home Depot every single day. And those were some really challenging times. People worked really, really hard, but they were also incredibly rewarding times where we were able to turn the business around, get growth going, even after the downfall of 07, 08, 09. By the fourth quarter of 09, we were actually able to turn the business into positive growth and never look back from that point forward. So it was great times, challenging times, but fun times.
So you talked about some of the best things, the most fun things that you did were around building teams, developing these different lines of business. But even developing those lines of business, that doesn't always go as planned. But the thing that one of the things I found very interesting about your career and your approach to how you operated as a leader, as a manager, was you always put people first. You were always about the team. And there's a story about, and we won't get into specific company names or even what the product types were because that might give a little away. But there's a story that I have heard about an up and coming um, company that landed a big contract to sell through Home Depot, and you guys were really investing heavily in them, helping them to get off the ground, and they started having success, and then they decided that they could have even greater success by also selling through a competitor. And I just want to hear a little bit from you about that and about the reaction and kind of what you did. And I think the priorities that you demonstrate through this episode are really amazing.
But yeah, there was an organization that was pretty much a startup business. And this company had brought some new technology into a space, and they were trying to grow their business. And one of our merchants was able to make contact with this company and walk through their factory and got excited about what it was. And so that merchant ended up investing a lot into this company in terms of, time, energy. We created an exclusive. We gave them floor space, and really helped them drive and grow their business in a pretty significant way, and made them or helped make them one of the leaders in the space. And had been doing business for a number of years together as exclusive partners, right? And the business was doing well, growing well. It was time to renegotiate the exclusive, and the team spent several weeks doing that, got that done. And about a week later, on a Sunday evening, our senior vice president over this area of business got a call from this company, and they said, we've made a decision that we actually want to exercise the out clause in the exclusive, and we're not going to be exclusive anymore, and we're taking this business to XYZ company. And I had known how hard the team, and particularly the merchant involved, and had worked to kind of help build this company and the company was doing well. They had a great product. And honestly, I was not real happy when I heard this news, because the SVP called me. He and I had worked together for a number of years. And I said, well, what's your initial reaction? you know? And he's like, well, my initial reaction is I'm really irritated. I go, well, that's good. So am I. And I said to this individual, I said, you kind of know how this went down, right? They sat in a room on a whiteboard and said, gee, we've got this great business, we got this great product. We're a big player in Home Depot. We can go expand this in a huge way. And we might lose a little business at Home Depot. They'll be mad for a while, but we'll grow this thing in a big way. And my comment to my SVP was, on that whiteboard, there was no scenario where it said Home Depot walks away from this business. So I said, you know exactly what we need to do, right? And he said, yeah. He goes, I already came to that conclusion as well. We're not going to have our merchants be kind of disrespected, if you will, in this way. And it may hurt us this spring, but a year from now, it'll be the right decision. And so that's what happened. And, I said, I'm behind you 100%. If that's the decision, and I think it's the right decision, by the way, but if that's the decision that you want to do, I already know the story that we'll give to the field. And that will fire them up that when you launch new product to replace this, they'll be so stoked they'll drive it till the cows come home.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did.
And that's my favorite part of the story is what you told the field and what you did for the field.
Yeah. 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 No, we actually went out and the field knew. I mean, they knew that how hard they had worked to help drive this business. I mean, one of the things that we always told our suppliers that like if you give Home Depot an exclusive, there's nobody in this industry like our associates on the floor of the store that will get behind something that competition doesn't have. And they'll go drive the daylights out of the sales, right? And they'll grow you faster than you can imagine. And that's exactly what they did. And so, really, all we had to do was go to the field and say, hey, here's what happened. Here's the decision the company made. They have no respect for what you've accomplished for them whatsoever. And now they're going to go hand that to your competitor. And here's what we're going to launch in its place. Well, that's all it took.
Mm-hmm.
And they got behind what we were going to launch in its place, which were with some other strong business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, about maybe 8 months later, the head of that company that
Mm-hmm.
made that decision called and wanted to come back to Home Depot.
Well, to me, again, you talk about corporate culture, and I would love to hear what you have to say about that. But the fact that again, my favorite part of that story is that you saw this is not right. This isn't good, and our people are not going to be treated this way. And you went to the people and reassured them they were not going to be harmed by this decision in any way. They weren't going to be penalized. And I think it was, that kind of loyalty to your team, to your people, instills in them loyalty towards you as a leader.
It goes back to the culture. Home Depot has a very unique culture. Matter of fact, many people talk about it as being an orange-blooded cult. But at the end of the day, our culture is represented by two very important symbols within the company. The first is the values wheel that everybody wears on their apron. And if you look at that values wheel closely, it represents all the key constituents in our business: the customer, our associate, our shareholders, and our communities. And so it talks about what we believe in around that values wheel. The second most important thing is the symbol of the inverted pyramid. And the inverted pyramid at Home Depot has at the very top the customer and the frontline associate. And myself as CEO and the leadership team and the board are at the very bottom of that pyramid. And we're at the bottom of that pyramid because it's our job to carry the weight and remove the burdens from our frontline associates so they can take care of the person who's most important, which is the customer. And at the end of the day, that's what our role as leaders at Home Depot was all about. How do we make it easier for our associates to take care of the customers? And how do we make sure we take care of our associates? Because without them, we don't have business.
Yeah.
And so that really is the number one focus in the job. And it's how do you remove anxiety? How do you give them competitive advantages? How do you make sure that you're taking care of them in times that are both good and bad? It's difficult, and we went through some difficult years. And there's lots of ways that we did that at Home Depot, but it is truly, I believe, the greatest gift we ever received from our founders. And if I take it back to my days at Michigan State and thinking about my management education and the focus on human resources, I look at that, and for me, after I joined the company, it was probably about 2 weeks after I joined the company when I knew right then and there I had joined the right organization, that this was a cultural fit for me because Bernie and Arthur put our associates first, and that's
Mhm.
everything that they focused on and everything they built in the culture that we tried to make sure that we maintained, nurtured, grew in the business. And that was our job as leaders in the business.
And I wonder how much of that for you also went back to your dad and being a machinist at General Motors,
Yeah.
and how many of your associates did you kind of visualize, say, hey, this is my dad here?
It's really interesting because in Home Depot, um, there are so many people that have gotten, I'll call it their PhD on the floor of the store,
Hmm.
right? Life gets in the way sometimes, and people can't accomplish what they set out to do. Life gets in the way. They couldn't go to school. They had to do something else. Um, and you saw folks who spent 20, 30 plus years with the company, who grew up in the organization, worked hard, worked really hard, learned the business, were amazing at what they did, and were, incredibly rewarded from both a fulfillment standpoint or a financial standpoint. And for me, one of the things that was probably the neatest time. So as a leadership team, and my predecessor started this, so I can't take credit for this. But as a leadership team, we would bring in once a month, we would bring in folks from all over the country from a particular area. It might be the top cashiers that would come in cashier month in October, or it might be the top performing region, and the stores would select, somebody and they from that region to come in. And so there was, probably 30, 40 people in the room. And we would sit down, my leadership team and I would have a meal with them. And by the way, we'd fly them in on the company planes. Many times the first time somebody ever flew in their life, right? Or
Wow,
had never left
much
their
less on
home.
a corporate jet.
Right. And so we'd bring them in, we'd sit down and we'd have a meal. And at the end of that, and my team was spread out throughout the room, we'd have tables of associates with us. At the end, you'd ask everybody to get up, introduce themselves, tell us where they worked, how long they've been with the company, and then very briefly, what was their story? How did they get to Home Depot? Right. And it was fascinating because there are some general themes that would come through over and over and over again. One of those themes was, hey, my kid was going to college and I needed some extra money. Or one of those themes was the holidays were coming around, so I went and got a part-time job because I wanted some extra money for Christmas. Another one of those themes was, boy, if I hadn't found Home Depot, I'd probably either be in jail or I'd be dead because I was heading towards gangs. Things were not good. It was not a good situation. And most of those times they'd talk about the fact that, yeah, I'm in my 15th year, I'm in my 20th year, I've done more than I ever thought I could possibly do. And the most common theme of all of that was somebody, and they'd name who it would be, when I first came to the company, put their arm around me, told me that I could do whatever I wanted to do in this company if I was willing to work hard and learn. And here I am 15 years later, accomplishing more than I ever dreamed was possible. I bought a house, I put my kids through college, all because of what happened here at Home Depot. It was funny. I remember walking out with my head of technology one night after that. He and I were getting the elevator going down, and he looked at me and he said, Craig, if that doesn't fire you up to want to come to work every single day and work just a little bit harder to make
Yeah.
their life easier, then you really don't belong in this business. And he
Well,
was absolutely right.
and it drives home the fact that it's a whole lot more than selling hammers and two by fours, right?
Yep. You're changing people's lives.
Changing people's
And
lives.
by the way, as for your customers, you're helping them fulfill dreams.
Hmm.
You're helping them take care of their biggest asset that they have, their home, or you're helping them, remodel and do something that they've always dreamed of doing within their home. So it's a fun business to be in. And, for years and years and years, as merchants, we were out multiple days a week, but even as, work through as, vice president running hardware, whether it was chairman and CEO, we had sacred Thursdays and we were in the stores virtually every Thursday. unless it was, earnings week or something like that.
Mhm.
We were out there talking with our associates, conducting town halls, meeting with our customers, um, and finding out how things were really going on the ground.
Yeah, that speaks to what you were saying a moment ago about um, really being focused on how do we remove obstacles? How do we help our people accomplish their goals and be successful? I tell my son all the time, son, if you want to be a leader, and don't assume that you should be there, not everybody should want to be a leader, because to be a leader, I believe, is really about putting other people before yourself. Leadership really isn't about what I'm going to accomplish or what I'm going to do. My success as a leader is based on how well are the people that I'm leading accomplishing their goals? How well are, how easily are they succeeding? And it's all about making sure that they are resourced and they have every opportunity to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
Absolutely.
Um, and there's a term for that when we're in the church and when we're reading scripture, and we call it servant leadership,
Mhm.
right? And we look
By
at
the way, we use that same term at Home Depot.
yeah,
Just
and the ultimate servant and the ultimate leader, of course, is Jesus Christ. And in him we have that image of the one who empties himself and and comes as a servant and suffers and takes our place, takes our all of our burdens upon himself, so that we can be actually realize our true and complete purpose and what we were made to be. Because apart from that, we're just like some of those themes you talked about, we're headed for either jail or or being dead, spiritually speaking. That's our reality.
yeah,
So it's, yeah, leadership to me, and what I try to instill in my son is that it really is, if you're not ready to put everybody else ahead of yourself and make sure that other people are being fulfilled, then it really isn't for you. Because unfortunately, not everybody who goes into business and not who everybody who becomes a leader has that in mind.
yeah,
But when it does work like this, we see that I like you pointed out, is it's helping not only your team members, not only your employees, dreams come true, but your customer. I mean, you're
mhm,
filling a need. Everybody wins when we have the right motivations and we do the right things the right way for the right reason. Then
yep,
then everybody wins. There's one additional story I do want to make sure that we get to, and this is going to March of 2020. And so this is an exciting, and this is one of those things why I love having folks like you on the show, so that we can kind of pull back the curtain and give people a little bit of insight into some things that maybe they remember, but they didn't know what was going on. So March 2020,
yep,
you and Dawn and other folks from the church there are in Israel,
yep.
or what was that, like a 2 week or 10 day, something like
It
that
was
tour?
a it was a 2 week trip to Israel. It's the
Yeah.
first time in 40 years I had ever taken 2 weeks off at the same time.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's important. Yeah. So you're doing this Holy Land trip. Jody and Shelly Ray, the senior pastor, and his wife are there. So you guys are there, and it's wrapping up about getting close to mid-March, right? And
Yep, March.
something happened
Yeah.
in mid-March of 2020. So why don't you just take it from there?
So yeah, actually, a number of folks on the trip were supposed to stay and go on to Jordan. I had to get back. My wife was one who was going to stay. And as it turned out, the Jordan border got shut down as the pandemic began to become known, if you will. And so we all got on a plane on March 12th to fly from Tel Aviv, one of the last flights out of Tel Aviv, back through New York to Atlanta. And as we're flying back, literally the whole thing is starting to implode. The NBA canceled the championship. The Final Four got canceled, and we're hearing this bits and pieces as people are on their phones, getting this information from the web through Wi-Fi, and we're like, really? This is like crazy, right? And so yeah, we got back. And so we landed on a Thursday. I actually had to go into the office on Friday because we